This year, Xiaomi have decided to release their Redmi K50 Gaming Edition before their standard K50 series lineup, which might be strange but actually makes sense because the regular K50 devices will most likely be running a different chipset to this, the K50 Gaming Edition, which is powered by Qualcomm's 4nm run Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 CPU, which in turn is a huge step up from its predecessor, which housed a Dimensity 1200 chip. But the biggest issue with last year's K40 Gaming Edition was its lack of Google services, which I'm happy to say has been included this time round. Other than its CPU and Google services, the K50 Gaming Edition has actually been improved by quite a bit when compared to last year's model. It has a new 20 megapixel IMX596 selfie camera, making it the first phone in the world to use the new Sony sensor, improved magnetic shoulder triggers, a new JBL quad speaker setup, a massive dual vapor chamber cooling system which covers not only the CPU but also its charging components, increased 120 watt charging, 1920 Hz pulse width modulation, and is now protected by Gorilla Glass Victus. This is TechNick, and this is my unboxing and review of the Redmi K50 Gaming Edition. The Redmi K50 Gaming Edition comes in 4 main colors. You can pick it up in a limited edition AMG F1 color, or Shadow Black, a Silver Wing Gray, or the color that I have, which translates to Ice Chop Blue. Very strange naming schemes over here, but it looks okay. I guess it's a bit subjective. It's not really for me, but I mean, if you're a gamer and you like this kind of appeal, it looks pretty cool. I do like the matte finish at the back though, and we have a 4700 mAh battery under the hood, as well as 120 watt wide charging, which is up from last year's 67 watts. Of course, we also have that Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 CPU, brand new dual vapor chamber cooling system, and upgraded LPDDR5 RAM. The display is protected by Gorilla Glass Victus this time around, whereas last year it was Gorilla Glass 5. The back this time is protected by Gorilla Glass 5, and we still have an aluminum frame wrapping around the device. The rear camera sensors are completely unchanged from last year, that being an 8 megapixel ultra-wide sensor, a 64 megapixel IMX686 main sensor, and 2 megapixel macro cam. The ultra-wide photo looks like an 8 megapixel ultra-wide sensor would look like. It looks okay. 64 main looks great. 16 megapixel bin down looks okay. This is an old sensor, but it still has a few tricks up its sleeve, such as 64 megapixel 2x digital zooming. We can also do 5x digital zooming at bin down 16 megapixels, and max is 10x zoom, which looks alright. We do have that 2 megapixel macro sensor, which takes a more than decent shot up close and personal to a subject. And we can also take a bokeh photo over here, a portrait effect, and it looks pretty great. You can adjust the aperture too, which is fantastic. We do have 4K 60 FPS over here, but no 8K video recording, and this can go all the way up to 60 frames per second, so nice and buttery smooth at 4K. We also have 1080p at 60 frames per second over here using the main camera. It looks extremely stable, which is always a nice little touch, and it's packed with detail and kind of handles light okay. We also have an ultra-wide video recording option here, but the max is 1080p at 30 frames per second, which is a bit of a bummer. So the camera setup, though still unchanged, is still okay for a gaming phone. Would it be nice to see an upgrade? Nevertheless, we do have those new pop-up triggers. They are very similar pop-up magnetic shoulder triggers that we saw last year, though this time called Triggers 2.0, with more than 40 elements from the complex mechanism being redesigned this time around. And of course, we still have those mechanical switches in order to lift the triggers up. They feel nice and clicky and very responsive like a gaming controller would. On the right hand side of the device, we have a power button / fingerprint sensor. We also have a volume rocker on the left hand side with a nifty little design over there, and a dual SIM tray which supports 5G, but unfortunately no expandable storage option over here. At the bottom, we have a USB 2.0 Type-C port, still not 3.1, but this time around we have a JBL quad speaker system. It is made up of 2 main speakers, one at the top and one at the bottom, and 2 tweeters, one at the top and one at the bottom for high frequencies. And yes, we do still have the IR blaster at the top of the phone. At the top of the display, we have a 20 megapixel selfie camera, and it is actually the world's first phone to use the new IMX596 selfie camera. Taking a regular photo looks absolutely fantastic and is packed with detail, but taking a bokeh portrait photo kind of lacks in terms of edge detection, with a lot of stuff being unblurred in the background, though the detail of my actual face is still there. This is TechNick recording a 1080p at 60 frames per second selfie video on the brand new Redmi K50 Gaming Edition Let me know what you guys think of the video quality as well as the audio quality when recording with the selfie camera. The selfie camera is awesome, I guess you could say. Nice and clear and crispy when it comes to photo and video, though portrait mode's not the best. And powering on the device, of course, we do have all the always-on displays and wallpapers that you'd have expected from Xiaomi devices in the past. We also have that side-mounted fingerprint sensor, despite it being an AMOLED panel, which means it should have an under-display fingerprint sensor, which it doesn't. Though we do also have 2D face unlock. It's not 3D face unlock and is not as secure as the fingerprint sensor, but does the job. We have the same 6.67-inch OLED panel, which is of course Full HD Plus and supports 1 billion colors and HDR10 Plus content. It goes up to 1300 nits of max brightness, has 120 Hz refresh rate and 480 Hz touch sampling rate, same as last year as well. But this time around, they have added 1920 Hz pulse width modulation to alleviate strain on your eyes. This is not an LTPO display, meaning that you can only choose between 120 and 60 Hz, even if you have the auto option set, but 120 Hz is still nice and snappy, and of course we have that 480 Hz touch sampling rate. We are running MIUI 13 skinned over Android 12, and it's not really about features this time around, it's all about optimizations, and I actually think they've pretty much done that here with the K50 Gaming Edition. And yes, this time around, Google does completely work the Play Store and Google services all out the box. We have an LED light at the back on the camera module like we saw last year, but you can't have it always on. It only really turns on when you charge or for a few seconds when you first open up a specific game or app. And we do have the same great vibration motors, that being the CyberEngine X-axis haptics, and haptics are pretty incredible. Of course, we also have that new JBL quad speaker system. So let's go ahead and give it a listen when playing some music. The entry-level K50 Gaming Edition has 8 gigs of RAM, but we can extend it by an extra 3 gigs thanks to RAM expansion. And we also have that new Qualcomm Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 chipset, of course, and when running that with the new performance mode, yields an AnTuTu score of 1,015,777 points, putting it right at the top of the list in terms of other Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 devices. When it comes to Geekbench results, however, it doesn't have the strongest single-core score, but it has one of the best multi-core scores I've ever seen. And when it comes to GPU performance, we got a score of 10,033 points, yielding 60.1 frames per second, matching its average FPS with the best of the lot here. And of course, since this is a Xiaomi device, we can enable a frame rate monitoring tool within developer options, and when we flick the switches at the top, those mechanical switches to get the pop-up triggers, Game Space, or Game Turbo as they used to call it, pops up, where you can tweak things such as different performance modes. And yes, you can adjust the shoulder triggers, though there's not many customization options for them. They are nice and clicky, and I do prefer physical ones like this instead of the touch triggers that we've seen in other gaming phones. And it got an FPS between 114 and 122 when maxing out graphics in Bullet Force, which is pretty similar to other Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 powered smartphones I've tested on my channel. And while we had a listen to music when using those new JBL quad speakers earlier, it's time to give a listen to some gaming. The Redmi K50 Gaming Edition is a huge step up from last year's model thanks to its new Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 chipset, faster LPDDR5 RAM, inclusion of 1920 Hz pulse width modulation, and Gorilla Glass Victus, new 20 megapixel IMX596 selfie camera which takes superb photos and videos, improved pop-up gaming triggers, new JBL quad speaker setup, and a massive dual vapor chamber cooling system. Its design is questionable but is sure to be a head turner. However, its rear camera setup is still unchanged, and there is still no headphone jack or option for expandable storage. The battery capacity has been lowered to 4,700 milliamps, but charging has increased to 120 watts, which can fill up the device in just 17 minutes. Which makes it easy for me to recommend the Redmi K50 Gaming Edition to any mobile gamer out there, not just because it's an incredible flagship device at a very good price, but because the K50 Gaming Edition is actually a huge upgrade over its predecessor.